Welcome back, folks, for a new episode of Leaked. And today we'll cover the AMX 65t. This is going to be a new Tier 8 French normal heavy tank. So it's a normal tank. And what this means is we're getting the second line of French heavy tanks pretty soon. So that's great news because this line was requested 4 years ago. So back then, this tank alongside with the AMX M4 model 1948 and the Char 50T-B were technically leaked or teaser trailered, but they were not implemented because popularity reasons. So back then, the French tanks alongside with the Chinese tanks were not that popular based on a player-based standpoint, and therefore were not that profitable. So Wargaming did not implement these vehicles. But 4 years did change a lot of stuff, so we're going to see the second line of French heavy tanks. But don't get too excited because it's likely going to be half a line or a third, since Wargaming is not going to introduce the lower tiers, the gigantic box tanks like the FCM F1 or the FCM 2C BIS. So the gigantic rail cart with no armor and slow French heavy tanks. So they said that these vehicles were not that fun to play, basically TOGs of Tier 2 and Tier 3. And since there's no multi-turret support, we're likely not going to see these vehicles. So it's going to be half a line with higher tier French new heavy tanks. So you still have to play through the BDR and the ARL 44 and maybe the AMX M4 model 1945 to get to these vehicles. But having some is better than having none, right? So it's all good. But what is AMX 65t? Well, the AMX 65t is basically a blueprint of an upgrade to the AMX 50 with a welded frontal pike-shaped nose and a conventional turret, so a single-shot turret. But they never implemented this vehicle since the oscillating turret was lighter, so they wanted a lighter vehicle for the AMX originally, but a lot of stuff, complications due to economic, political reasons, the Korean War. So the French wanted American support, wanted American funding for their tanks, but America fought the Koreans in the Korean War, and they were using the M47 patents and later the M48 patents, and politics, logistics never came out. So yep, there goes the AMX 50 project. But here you can see the evolution of French heavy tanks, starting with the ARL 44. So originally the ARL 44 were not that well received because the ARL has obsolete suspension and was unsatisfactory. So that's the main reason that the M4 project was developed, to basically replace the ARL 44 and return France into a glorious tank building days of FT-17, so before World War II. But the M4 project has a lot of steps. So initially they developed this tank based on the Tiger, the King Tiger, and the Panther tanks. So they wanted armor, they wanted low weight, they wanted the speed and the firepower of a medium and a lot of capabilities, and yeah, too much stuff were asked of this vehicle and never came out of it. So design flaws, development process, delays, a lot of stuff happened. But here you can see the development chart. So the Chasseur de Chars, the CDC, was based on the early models of the M4. So I already told you from the leak video based on the CDC, but that was like a year and a half ago. The MX 50 project is basically a renaming of the M4 project. So after different development cycles with the M4, changing out the armor, changing out the weight and the engine, fitting the 100mm from the 90, also with the oscillating turret. So different stuff happened, 5 years of development process, and they renamed the project into the AMX 50. So basically it's still the M4 project. The Char Samoa SM, this is basically competing against AMX. The Samoa company developed a similar vehicle based on the Panther-ish of a chassis with the oscillating turret. So it looks a lot like the AMX 50-100. but they canceled this because logistic reasons and politics too. You also had the Char Lorraine, which is the Lorraine 40T, and this was developed because the AMX 50 was too heavy, so they wanted a lighter vehicle without that much armor. So basically a medium-ish of a tank with the same oscillating turret and the road wheels with inflated rubber tires. So like this vehicle, will be replaced by the Batchat 25T AP. Oh well. Now you have the AMX 65T, 68T, and the 70T. So these three vehicles are blueprints, basically a modification before the development of the AMX 5120. So they wanted a bigger gun onto the AMX 5100, but they still had to change the turret ring. So these tanks were basically different versions of mounting the 120mm onto a modified chassis for the AMX 50, but blueprint tanks, so nothing came out of it. Then you have the AMX 50B, which is basically a modified hull, so lower version of the hull. Cast hull was lowered, and a lighter turret to reduce the weight from 65-ish tons to 58-ish tons. So that's the AMX 50B. And you have the AMX M4 model 1949, a Meteore, basically modified. So this is basically a blueprint with the 1949's version of the M4 with even more armor at the front. It's like 280mm at the front. So I thought this was going to be the tier 10 versions of the second line, but a lot of debates, and you finally have the Char 50TB, which is the AMX 50B's chassis with the conventional TCB's turret, M103-ish of a turret on top. So that's the evolution of French heavy tanks. But the main reason that the AMX 50B or the 50 was cancelled was because logistics reasons, no funding, and development process was delayed. Also, conventional turrets were preferred since oscillating turrets were not that well suited against nuclear or biological contaminant. Just say NBC, there you go, just NBC contaminations. So nuclear, chemical, biological attacks, Cold War, oscillating turret, not that well suited. The whole project was cancelled. There you can't even talk. But here is the AMX 65T. So it's a blueprint tank. As you can see, it's a conventional turret, a single shot, onto the AMX 5120's chassis. Now, there were different chassis for the AMX 5120, but this is the latter version. The early version looks a lot like the 5100s, so like the Panther's chassis. This one has the pike-shaped nose, so it's the latter versions. Basically developing from the IS-3 concepts. So a lot of the French tanks were based off different tanks. So they like the Panthers with the overlapping road wheels, so they liked it. Turns out too heavy, so let's change to torsion bars. Let's change to pike-shaped nose. No funding, so oh well. But here you can see the in-game models, the early models of this vehicle. So basically AMX 5120 with a different turret. It's fine, it's okay, but take note of the sloping of the frontal pike-shaped nose and the turret. So this part is very well sloped, as well as the beak. It looks even steeper than the actual 5120. I checked, but it's a picture-based reference, so I think there might be some improvements over the 5120. Have to be tested, but interesting enough. Also take note that the cupola right here, the commander cupola, is also well sloped. It's about 45 degrees, and this is 200mm of armor. So that's quite thick, but it's basically a larger turret onto the 5120's chassis. In a nutshell. But here are the HD models of this vehicle. So big turret, and yeah, Panther-ish of a chassis with overlapping road wheels. So based on the German designs. The French really like the German Panthers and Tiger tanks, so they wanted it. Also note that the periscopes on the commander cupola is 250 millimeter. It's rounded. So this is not actually a weak spot per se. But also note the mantlet doesn't cover the entire turret. So it's this little hole here. That might be a weak spot, but this plate is only 130-ish millimeter, whereas this is 250. So we'll see the armor schematics, but it's not really a French heavy tank in this game's standards. But yeah, it's a real heavy tank. So yeah, big turret, French vehicle. Okay, but here are the collision models for the AMX 65t. So here are the points to consider before inspection. So here you can see the pike-shaped nose hull might be better sloped than the 5120's version. So might be a better bounciness. The cupolas are sloped and both thick. So especially for the commander cupola right here, this is 200 millimeter-ish. Periscopes on the commander cupola is 250 or 230, so pretty thick. And turret base is not that thick right here, but it's well sloped and rounded, so it will bounce a few shots. But here are the in-depth schematics analysis. So here you can see the loader cupola is slightly rounded and sloped. It's about 130-ish millimeter at 45 degrees rounded, so it's about 183 millimeters effective. Commander cupola, if it's 200 millimeter at 45 degrees, then it's 282.84 millimeter effective. That will bounce. Periscope is about 250 millimeter rounded, so funny. The top is slope at 200 millimeter, slope at 45-ish. So this part right here, that's about 282. Turret face right here, that's 250 at about 60 degrees, so 288, still pretty thick. Turret ring, this part right here, is rounded and sloped, but it's about 80-ish millimeter, so it's about 190 millimeter effective. But if it's 100 millimeter, that could go up to 236 millimeter effective. So this turret is pretty strong if hauled down, but it could haul down. But still, it's like a E75's turret, 250 at the front, so it's not French. So it's like the AMX M4 model 1949 that I covered last year. Still pretty thick though. Hull front is mostly like the 5120, mostly, but there are a few seldom small differences, slight differences. So here you can see the driver hatch is not as wide of a triangle as the 5120's driver hatch right here. So this is about the same, 50-ish millimeter effective, or 50-ish sloped at 30-ish degrees, so still about 120 millimeter effective, not that much. So frontal plate is about 150 through 170 with the cheeks, and upper plate is 130 to 145 right here. Yeah, lower plate is 174-ish because better sloped. So yeah, the hull armor is kind of crap, but the turret is a lot better than AMX 5120's turret front, which is only 80 millimeter right here, and the turret ring, which is 100 millimeter. So this is not French per se, based on the game's standards. But here is the side shot. So the turret is somewhat bigger, therefore camouflage value is not as good. But here you can see the turret size is 200 millimeter down to 80, so rainbow. Whereas on the AMX 5120, it's only 90 to 60. So yeah, a lot thicker. But here you can see the side armor is slightly smaller than the 5120. So these two tanks should have the same chassis, should, quote unquote, but it looks a little bit smaller based on the track link size. So here you can see the track link on the 5120. It's a little bit more squarelier, more squarish than the rectangle on the 65T. So, differences. But here are the main stats for the AMX 65T. So it's going to be a normal Tier 8 French heavy tank. Now, if it has the same crew like the AMX M4 model 1945, then it should have a crew of 5. But if it's like the AMX 5120, then it should have a crew of 4. So the extra crewman is the loader. So the rest of the guys are the AMX 5120's crew is the commander, the gunner, the driver, and the radio operator. Surprisingly, yeah, there's no loader in AMX 5120. I checked. So it could be a crew of 4 or it could be a crew of 5, but has 1400 hit points, which is slightly below average, 1000 horsepower engine, weighs about 65 tons. Power to weight ratio is 15.38. So that's pretty good. That's way above average for a heavy tank. Top speed is 40 kilometers per hour, just above the average. Reverse is 20, so that's pretty good. Hull traverse is 25 degrees per second. Turn traverse is about 30 degrees per second, so that's slightly above average. Terrain resistance is below average for hard and soft, so that's alright to counterbalance the horsepower per ton ratio. Fine. View range is slightly below average, like a Russian tank. Slightly better than a Russian tank because 350 meters compared to 360, but 360, it's a close range, view range. So go brawling, I guess. Radio is standard. Hull armor is 100 at the front, 80 at the sides, 60 at the rear. Turret armor is 250 at the front, 80 at the sides, and 60 at the rear. So you have 3 gun choices for this vehicle. All of them are pretty good. So it's the same gun selection as the AMX 5120, which is very good for a Tier 8 tank. That's amazing. So you have the 120, 100mm, and the 90. So ammo count for all of them are generally good enough. And the penetration for the 120 is astoundingly awesome. 257mm pen for a Tier 8 heavy. That's the best. The second best is the T34 with 249mm. So that's the best penetration. That penetrates Tier 10 reliably. This is Tier 10 gun. Just a single shot. Alright. Gold shell also pretty good. Alpha, very good. Rate of fire is below average, but the DPM, 1900 DPM. That's alright. That's average. A lot of players say, ooh, 1900 DPM, that's crap. Well, dude, you fit a gun rammer. You fit a vents onto this thing, and that's like 2100 DPM. That's pretty good. What are you talking about? So reloads every 12.3 seconds with a rammer-ish. Accuracy is average, 0.38. Aim time is good, 2.59 seconds compared to like 3.4 seconds on Russian tanks. Yeah, that's pretty good. Gun depression is 8 degrees, so that's very important because it has a strong turret. And matching with good gun depression means hull down tactics with this tank is actually amazing. Elevation is French, but it's not oscillating turret, so still, that's crap. 13 degrees of elevation. Now the stock gun is still decent. So you have 100mm with very good penetration too, 232. Alpha is not as good, but better DPM, slightly better accuracy, way better accuracy, better aim time, and same gun depression and elevation. They did not give the stats for the 90mm, but this tank could mount a 90mm as the stock gun. So still very good penetration. Actually the average penetration for a stock gun. So that's amazing. Alpha is below average, and they did not give the rest of the stats, but based on the penetration and damage alone, still pretty good. So here are the final thoughts and opinions about the AMX 65T. So originally, this tank was scheduled for patch 7.0, been 4 years, so shelved and collects dust for 4 years. Originally thought to be tier 9 based on the gun selection, but this version is Tier 8. So, very, very interesting. So, all three guns and choices for this tank are amazing. So, that's dramatic. It's a Tier 9 tank. You place at Tier 8, the guns are amazing. The horsepower per ton ratio, the reverse speed, and turret armor on this tank is actually astounding. Weakness, terrain resistance, health, gun elevation, side armor is crap. Basically 80mm, that's the Tiger 1's side armor. View range is below average. Average accuracy 0.384. And camouflage rating is not the best. It's taller than the 5120. And the 5120 is not known for camouflage rating. So, yeah, the camouflage on this thing is the... So basically, the same gun choices as the AMX 5120, a faster T34 with better trade-offs, a few trade-offs. So it's faster to reverse and vibrate in place, better terrain resistance, and yeah. View range is actually better, I believe. It's 350 on the T34, so a few trade-offs. But the stock grind on this tank is a breeze. The 90mm has the penetration, the 100mm has way better penetration and the alpha, and the 120, just devastating. So the stock grind is a breeze, capable of ramming smaller tanks based on the pike-shaped nose. Now what's good about the pike-shaped nose is it protects your tracks from becoming detracked when you ram somebody. Some vehicles like the Lorraine 40T, when you ram somebody, the tracks come off because they're junting out of the chassis, whereas this vehicle has a pike-shaped nose to hit first rather than hitting the tracks first. So, small benefit, but it's not as fast as the 5120, so the top speed is only 40 kilometers per hour, whereas the 5120 has 65 kilometers per hour, so it's not as fast to rev up and smash into somebody, but you have a good gun to do the rest. So might be a better pike-shaped armor sloping than the actual 5120. Need to have the model to test this out, but what this means is you could bounce a few shots now if you're hull down. So the upper plate will bounce a few shots and just don't expose the lower plate. So yeah, this tank is not that bad. Could possibly be a tier 9 with just a few, DPM buff, like about 200. And this could be a tier 9 vehicle. That's how good it is, in my opinion. So is it worth it? It's a true high tier heavy tank for the French, so it's pretty decent. The gun turret combo is worth it alone because you have the turret armor, you have the gun depression, and devastating gun for a tier 8 heavy tank. Just insane. Imagine you're out, DPMing IS-3s with this gun. You're basically easily penetrating IS-3s, IS-6s, no problem. So facing this vehicle where they have problem penetrating your turret and sometimes with your hull with the Derpy 122, 175 millimeters of pen, yeah, this pike-shaped nose will have some reliability against those Derpy 122 Russian guns, but it's still very solid. It would be amazing if this vehicle has 65 kilometers per hour top speed, so you can go ramming a lot better, but the gun's good enough to do the same. So in theory, it's based on the chassis of the AMX 5120, but there are a few slight differences, so let's not cover them. Already did, but balance issues. So yeah, the second high tier French heavy tank line is coming soon. So it was leaked in patch 7.0 with the Char 50TB, this vehicle right here, which is basically AMX 50B's chassis with the TCB's turret, conventional turret, rather than the oscillating turret, like an M103-ish. Never came out. This is the version with the pike-shaped nose, the same as the 5120. Here's another shot. This is the recently released Sahm SM. So the competition against the AMX 50 looks a lot like the AMX 5100, but this is going to be a premium tier 8 French heavy tank. So we have two premium French heavies in the lineup. One is this vehicle, the Sahm SM, And the other one is the AMX M4 model 1949 that I covered last year. So I believe one of those will become Tier 9 or Tier 8. And this vehicle could become Tier 9 with the Char 50TB becoming Tier 10 or the Migliore becoming Tier 10. So I'll cover all of these vehicles in more depth with the what if video. But there you go, folks. The AMX 65t. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.